Greetings, good morning. This is Dwight in Richmond, and tonight I'm going to be reading, or this morning, it's morning, but we do the call on Tuesday nights. I'm going to be doing the reading of the third installment of Letter 5, so this will be Letter 5C. I hope that's what it comes out to be. I've seen where I've said something on a previous recording and got it wrong, so I'm always, I give myself permission to be wrong, permission to make mistakes, and it's a great freedom. I don't have to be perfect in your eyes or my eyes. I just have to be perfect in every moment and allow that within me to do it. So I just share that as one of those revelations that free us from attachment and to be free. So this week we're reading Letter 5, and if you're searching, you could just search on a bunch of asterisks. You can put 5 asterisks in on your search. If you're searching on a Windows-based computer, it's Control-Shift-F as in Frank, or F as in find. So it's Control-Shift-Find, and just put in 5 asterisks and hit enter, and it'll take you right to that spot. And we're beginning the paragraph right under that. And that paragraph begins with, having said all the above, and proceeded to dictate the rest of the letter, the recorder of my words began to question the likely public reception of this letter, because it seemed to have too pragmatic to appeal to people who are accustomed to picturing some magnificent power or being or utterly other, which has given birth to the universe. So Christ totally dismantles that, dismisses that concept and replaces it with the truth of existence. So if you're reading from Christ Returns, Reveals Startling Truth, you're beginning on page 216, paragraph 3. If you're reading from Christ Returns, Speaks His Truth, the first printing, which is book form, that's page 228, paragraph 3. If you're reading from Christ's Letter, the second draft before becoming the book of Speaks His Truth, which I also attached to my email, chapelinthesky@aol.com. That's page 144, paragraph 3. If you're reading from the draft before the one I just quoted, the first draft of Christ Returns Speaks His Truth, it's page 6, paragraph 5. They got away from that letter, numbering each letter separately. And if you're reading from the original manuscripts, it's letter 4A. That's the way Christ deemed them in the early days. Well, I won't go into that. Letter 4A in the original manuscript is page 8, paragraph 6. And I know there's some dissension with this, so I've got to find out which is the one that you may have. But I have, it's in the ebook, Christ, it's page 175, paragraph 2. And someone on the call last Tuesday said in their book, it's page 189. So check both of those. And if 175 is incorrect, please email me at chapelinthesky and let me know so I can get the right reading so that you can go right to the page that we're at if you so desire, which I encourage to read along with, because at least for me, the way my brain works, reading and hearing at the same time is just like 2 dimensions of a 3-dimensional picture, and brings a picture in very clearer for me. So with that done, with that piece of intellectualism, I now go and invite you to come with me into that stillness and silence, that place of no thought in my mind, in your mind. In the background, I hear cicadas. I don't know if they come through the mic, but it's just so nice to be connected with nature, what I call the unadulterated God, that God that doesn't have man's imprint on it, except for what we're causing in it. But the forest is self-aware and self-exists and self-perpetuates itself, all in perfect harmony and balance. And when it appears not to be, there's that intelligence that knows how to bring it back into balance. Nature is the tree of life, spoken of in Genesis. It has no choice but to be God, to be the expression of the idea of itself. Human has that same intelligence and expression to express God just the way we are. But instead of doing it in harmony with the law of our brothers and sisters, we do it from our limited mindset, and therefore have created a world of seeming chaos and something to be fearful. Whereas the law of the human mind has in store for us harmony, cooperation, equality, being, through our intellect, through our ability to analyze all situations and listen to the one source of all good that has the answer to every question, the solution to every problem. Everything is an infinite possibility in the universe. There's a possibility for so-called bad. There's a possibility for so-called good to counter that bad and bring it into balance. Knowing the white water of letter 5 ahead of us, I just speak these words to encourage us to open. I ask us to just open, to be open to concepts that may be very different, but listening to them frees us, you and me, and our world from us, through us. For as we look for perfection, we call forth perfection. And perfection is a result of that exercise. So as we enter into this letter, into a deeper understanding of that from which everything comes, the galaxies, the planets, the solar systems, the earth, the trees, the water, the minerals, the insects and animals, vegetation, everything that lives and everything that does not live, even buildings and structures are all of this source. They also come from that, from which everything comes. Because first there's an idea, a consciousness, a big bang. And from that, everything that satisfies that consciousness intention, that consciousness desire, is brought forth into manifestation. So it goes from the space to the consciousness, which is the beginning. The space is that from which the beginning comes. And then that beginning is formless, yet matter coming into form. I am so grateful for Christ bringing this forth. I'm grateful for the recorder bringing these ideas, these concepts, these mind-blowing truths or concepts or ideas that give meaning to that which has surely given us form and life, for it is life itself. Christ tells us on letter 1, come with an open mind, and I will give you everything you need to bring forth the kingdom of heaven on earth, the era of peace and love and joy and support for all beings. So it is in this experience, in this energy vibration right here and now, that we bring this into what we hear through these letters. Allow them to come from the vibrational energy around you, into you, as it comes into me and through me. We all receive the gifts, the blessings in accordance with our own openness, our own understanding. And the more receptive and questioning we are, the more fulfilled will the letters satisfy us. I accept our open minds to receive the gifts that Christ, through his dear recorder, had brought to us, so that in this lifetime, in these final months of 2018, we surely can have peace on earth, right in our lifetime, right now. These letters, and you and I, are the means through which these letters bring our energy into the environment around us. And in that, just knowing we are this expression of God, as is everyone and everything else, just bringing that awareness into the energy consciousness, the collective consciousness around us, even all of humanity, we bring forth the light into the world of darkness. And it is awakening, it is stretching, it is seeking, and we are there for it to find the truth, or the way to the truth. Yes, we are all just the way showers of the truth. Thank you for this time. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for being together. And thank you for being a part of the energy that we have on Tuesday evenings, and all of its energy comes forth to us in this moment. So we are totally absorbed in the Christ mind awareness, right here and right now, not just for us, not just for this now, but for here, everywhere, and all eternity. And I release it with thanksgiving, knowing this is so. Absolutely knowing it is so right here, right now. And I release it to do its work through us. And so it is. I always give thanks to you, for it is my connectedness with you, you're connected with me, that in this oneness we call forth. Where two or more are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst. So we call forth that Christ presence that we seek, that we allow ourselves to become one with. Christ tells us in the introduction that I can't come in a form anymore. I must come in consciousness. I cannot fit all that I have to say in a form, because if the form is saying it, it's not the same as the consciousness of the form saying it. So, okay, we have a little preceding before we go into the white water. So right now we're going through the nice calm, and then Christ is preparing us. So as we get to that difficult part of the course, perhaps that part that may have the greatest resistance, not resistance of not believing or not acceptance, just resistance as this is so out of the box that it really just, the box wants to contain it and understand it. But until we say it's not understandable, we just have to accept it. We just have to let it be. There it is. And boy, that's a good precedent to set. Okay. So having said all the above and proceeded to dictate the rest of the letter, the recorder of my words began to question the likely public reception of the letter, because it seemed to her, this letter seemed to her, too pragmatic to appeal to people who are accustomed to picturing some magnificent power or being, or utterly other, which has given birth to the universe. So many of us have a concept of God being this gigantic human being, usually a man with robes, usually with beard and white flowing hair, usually white, is at least in the white community is where it's presented, perhaps in the black community too, although I know the shift is really changing because we've got to get God out of a body. A body cannot be everywhere present, okay? That's the bottom line. So we've got to get this concept of God out of a body and make it universal, infinite, beyond understanding. All we can do is the best we can do, but it's beyond that. Christ compares our understanding to the light of a firefly compared to the sun. Okay, so there's so much more that our bodies are containing us from being. That's why death is such a freeing experience, because we're no longer limited by these senses. Our natural spiritual senses are fully available to us and work. So, indeed, I have made numerous efforts to describe the immensity of the power out of which all things have come. But as I have said, it is impossible for me to describe in human terms the reality of your source of being. Those spiritually evolved souls, and I include us in this, wherever we are on our path, because we have come this far, if we've been reading all the letters up to here, that we are in an evolutionary state of being, of awareness, of seeking and finding and opening to more. That I'm saying Christ is speaking directly to us. Those spiritually evolved souls who have been lightly infused with divine consciousness. So even if we had just a little bit of our understanding, we report the experience to be utterly beautiful and glorious and entirely unforgettable. And if you have meditations that take you out into that space or away from the confines of physical body or walls or ceilings or anything, if we get in touch with that allness of being, then we're really experiencing. So Christ is just telling us in this letter what we actually experience. And these times, like the meditations I'm speaking, are not fully describable in human terms. This mystical experience is possible when the frequencies of vibration of the mind are already raised and the entire consciousness is suffused with the rays of divine consciousness. It is a condition that involves the feelings more than the intellect and brain cells. In this case, where I have to infuse my recorder's mind with brain cells, infuse my recorder's mind and brain cells with a description of the reality of your source of being, and she has to interpret in words, I have to take care not to interfere too forcibly with the frequencies of vibration of consciousness in which my recorder's brain cells are working. There have been occasions when it was dangerous to proceed any further, and I have had to interrupt the work of her computer to break the contact. Sometimes, I don't know about you, but when I'm in meditation, my mind goes off on a tangent. Nothing wrong with that, it's a beautiful tangent. But still, it's away from the path that I was on. So Christ says, in order to bring her back, I've had to, my assumption, okay, not necessarily the way it is, my assumption is in order to bring her back to the path, I stopped the computer because it stopped that venture. I allowed her to finish that venture, but then by the time she had to come back to where she left off, she was back in the same place where she left off so we could begin again. So before you begin to study, meditate and absorb the following pages. I want to make it clear to all who read these letters that my purpose in coming through them is first and foremost to dispel the myths which have surrounded my human persona and teachings, my being Jesus, okay? Or Buddha or Muhammad or whoever master is your master. For me, it's Jesus, so, so I refer to it as Jesus. But put in your master's name, whatever that is. The beginning of this paragraph can be read several ways. The way I read it is, before you begin to study, meditate and absorb the following pages. I want to make it clear that all who read, okay? Or it could also be read, before you begin to study, meditate, and absorb the following pages. I want to make it clear. So I ask you to read that on your own and see what meaning it has for you. For me, these letters are studying. And part of the study is to meditate. And part of meditation is to absorb the reality that's presented in them. So I will say without interruption, before you begin to study, meditate and absorb the following pages. I want to make it clear to all who read these letters that my purpose in coming through them is first and foremost to dispel the myths which have surrounded my human persona and teachings, my being, as I said, Jesus or Buddha or whomever. It is my intention, my Christ intention, that religious dogma and doctrines should eventually die a natural death, worldwide, as complete a death as the animal sacrifices in the Temple of Solomon. Secondly, again, why I've come. Secondly, I have also come to help the churches let go their archaic notions of God and sin. No true spiritual progress is possible until the dawning of a clear realization that each person is responsible for the way his or her life develops. We have life, we choose how to live this life. And those choices are what creates our body, our relationships, everything in our life and our world. Okay? So he wants to get rid of this because this belief in separation of sin and a God of judgment is not the way of being. I mean, that's a pure myth that we've been told to believe and told to believe by others who believe that same myth. And so Jesus has come to say, I'm here to bring you the truth of being, the truth of existence, and the true processes of creation in which you yourselves play a major role. And that's what this letter is all about. This is really the nuts and bolts of creation. Thirdly, I've come to remove from your minds the pictures of an almighty God of magnificence and grandeur and unlimited active power. Poof, day one. Poof, day two. Poof, day three. God's not a magician. So I've come to remove in your minds the pictures of an almighty God who rewards the virtuous and punishes the wicked. These beliefs are wholly erroneous, albeit comforting. People are comforted when, well, they'll get their just reward on the other side. Well, no, they get their just reward right here, right now. And yes, the other side also provides a continuation of that consciousness. But this is the time where we are judged and judge, okay? Not by God, not by a self, but by the law of existence. Fourthly, I'm explaining the truth of being for you to finally dispel the old concept of God sitting aloft somewhere in heaven, where he is said to have created the world and all that is in it in a relatively short while. Fifthly, I've come expressly to help science bridge the gulf between the universal consciousness and the appearance of electrical particles. Without this bridge between the unseen spiritual dimension and the seen world of matter, science will remain rooted in old ideas and concepts instead of moving forward into new realms of spiritual scientific research for the betterment of mankind. So it's time to realize that science biology, physics all reveal laws of how God works, but consciousness is the activity of the Father. The laws just explain how the Father works, its functions. I've also come to show you the true nature of that which brought you into being, gave you individuality. For without this knowledge, which will reveal to you the nature of your dual yet fully interrelated being, spirit and body, you'll also remain rooted in the same level of consciousness as you may be at this moment. So it's important for us to recognize that we are spirit and body. Spirit as body. Body as spirit. It's all the same. It's all interwoven. There's no place where body begins and spirit ends, or spirit ends and body begins. There's none of that. There's no beginning and end to that. Everything is now. Everything is now. Everything is now. And the past is this now extended to the past, and this now to the future is extended this now to the future. But right now is the moment that I have total, complete power in and of. I want to make it manifest. So these are the 5 or 6 things that Christ has brought us, okay? So take time to meditate on each of those and absorb them and feel, because it's preparation to the white water ahead. I also want to make it manifestly clear that nothing ever comes from nothing, okay? Which is one of my favorite sayings. Everything comes from nothing. Christ is saying nothing ever comes from nothing. This is a well-known saying among you and a perfectly true one. However, there is an eternal, infinite, consistent foundation of beingness, and this I am going to reveal to you. You have not been created. You have drawn your being from it, that being, that from which all things come. Obviously, you could not have come from something entirely foreign to your own consciousness. Okay. So nothing ever comes from nothing. And Christ explains this. I am asking my recorder to choose some mundane, understandable examples of nothing ever coming from nothing. You could not draw a filling for tots from a vat of treacle, which someone looked up and said it's a form of molasses, or maybe even molasses, and discover they were mincemeat. Okay. I say you can't get corn from a tomato seed is another way I would say it. You could not squeeze an orange and make ginger beer from the juice. Can only get orange juice out of an orange, right? I mean, these are showing the ridiculousness of believing in chance, okay? You could not fill a balloon with air, pop it, and find it dripping with jelly. And Christ comes back. All the above examples chosen by my recorder are instances of logic or illogic. I want you to realize that your entire universe is a manifestation of logic and consistent logical effects arising out of related causation. Cause and effect. I cannot get an effect that does not have the corresponding cause. So the cause of apple seed cannot produce anything but apples. It's the only way it can be. Our thought cannot produce anything but the thought that we have with the feeling we have. Your universe is cause and effect made visible. This is an undeviating principle of existence. The universe is cause and effect made visible. Cause being invisible, effect being the manifestation. This is an undeviating principle of existence. If there are instances of deviation, such as paranormal experiences or instantaneous healings, the average person exclaims, "A miracle has happened," in astonishment, and science refuses to believe that such a thing is possible. As my explanation deepens, you'll eventually understand how such deviations take place, logically and effectually. In other words, these deviations occur according to natural spiritual laws and always serve a necessary purpose. Nowhere is there any mindlessness in creation, even in the ant or gnat, unless the mind of an entity has been born defective or been damaged. And even then, it functions as perfectly as that function exists. Even the so-called freaks that we see in nature are still part of its perfection. Okay, so that's a paragraph that I invite you to pause and reread and contemplate, because it's very, very deep. And in fact, read the 2 paragraphs above it too, beginning with, I want you to realize that your entire universe. Okay, nothing comes from nothing. Therefore, it is clear you live and operate in a physical universe which displays the highest degree of intelligence and purposeful activity within the creation of matter itself, in the physical bodies of all individual entities, from plants to human beings. Unfortunately, this high degree of intelligence and purposeful caring is only minimal in the consciousness displayed by the creative entities themselves, from plants to human beings. So our human being, the physical that we see, touch, taste, smell, and senses all around us, is, as Abraham Hicks says, or Esther Hicks, Abraham through Esther Hicks says, that our physical expression is tiny, teeny, itsy bitsy in comparison to the consciousness which has created it, which is creating it. It's not that it's created and it's done, it's constantly creating it. Our thoughts and feelings are constantly telling our consciousness what we believe, and our consciousness says, that's what you believe. This is what I create for you, through you. And so as we believe higher belief systems, consciousness raises that and brings us Christhood, and everything to evolve this Christ is brought to us. Some things we see as negative, but those are there to assist us in, how does the Christ handle this? How does the Christ observe this? How does the Christ absorb this? How does Christ bring its truth into this? And how does this express the truth? Hitler expressed much of truth as Jesus did in the way he did it. So I love bringing him in, because Hitler's just someone that's at one end of the spectrum that we think is such a horrible being. At the other end of the spectrum, we see Jesus as the ultimate, the potential of what we can be. And all of us have both of those within us. And all of us are somewhere on this continuum from the so-called least or most negative to the highest or the best or the greatest. Okay, and we're all somewhere in there. Done unto us as we have believed. In other words, the bodies in which you conduct your lives, in which you think and feel and do whatever comes to mind, manifest within their physical organs and working parts a much higher order of intelligence and loving purpose than does your human consciousness. Okay. Everything in our body works from the tree of life. There is no questioning that the heart is anything but a heart. That's its only function. And it performs that function in accordance and within the consciousness of the lungs, so that they work in concert and harmony. And this orchestrator of consciousness that brings the good of both of those to have this body exist without having to think about it. So the human being is very physical and very, just like the squirrels. But the consciousness of it is how we use this body. Human interests are mostly wrapped up in the problems of personal daily survival, enjoyment of pleasures, and emotional, physical satisfaction. That's most of what the human mind is involved in. We're trapped, and that keeps us trapped in the physical consciousness, the lower vibrations of consciousness. To achieve these purposes, the majority of people use only the commodities manufactured out of matter. Even the minds of scientists cannot fully unravel the hidden secrets of earthly existence, and despite all their scientific expertise, are as bogged down in the changing fortunes of existence as are those who have no learning at all. Therefore, it is a logical conclusion that out of which you have drawn your physical being is one of immensity, not only of size, but immensity of willpower, the will to self-expression and creativity. This is why we meditate on these, and that's why I add so much, because my meditations give so much more to what Christ is saying. As I want you, this is to pause this at any time and contemplate what has been said, what you're reading. Visualize for a moment the size of the material universe, the sun and its heat, the moon, the Earth planet and solar system, the galaxies of stars, and the fact that all this visible material is totally interdependent, yet also dependent on the movement of the planetary bodies and subject to universal laws of consistent function and movement. This vast universe has had its origins within and has been drawn out of the foundation of your being, and the entirety of life force energy in the universe has been drawn out of that same foundation of being. I want to jump ahead. He's going to talk about space, then he goes into a deep discussion on space, but he begins with space being the ultimate consciousness, space being that from which everything comes. And we can't return to that space, because if we do, we lose our consciousness. So space is that which is before the beginning, and consciousness is the very beginning. It would be the Big Bang idea. So just wanted to say that. Therefore, do not be dismayed if in my efforts to analyze for you the spiritual components of your source of being, you find that you recognize what these components are, and to a very, very, very limited extent, possess the same spiritual components of consciousness yourself. So all that I'm learning here is confined by my imagination. The bigger my imagination, the more of it I can comprehend. And as Christ says, when he left the body of Jesus on the cross, he went into this enormous, beyond understanding love and light and color than could ever be described in human terms, so we could really see the immensity and all of that with it. So he says, you're not going to get there. You may, but only when you die will you see this. But in meditation, we can at least taste it. It's like touching the garment of Jesus, at least it gives us the insight to go beyond, knowing, wow, death has got to be good, because as good as this life is, the afterlife is so much even better. Before I explain to you how this could be, I want you to take certain steps to help your minds absorb the immensity of that out of which you have drawn your being. So hear this, he says this oftentimes, of that from which all things have come. That is indescribable. That cannot be comprehended. So Christ can only give us ideas outside of our idea of how the source brings itself into being. So we can only have ideas of what that is. And Christ is saying, I'm going to take you beyond those ideas, beyond any of those ideas. So every time we see that from which everything comes, Christ is introducing, this is what I'm going to be bringing to you. That which has never been described or discussed in any detail except in the physical form. After you have read the next pages to the end of my letter, take each paragraph individually into meditation and visualization. For only in this way will the words and quotes begin to grow in realization and take on the spiritual reality of their true meaning. So words represent concepts, pictures, ideas. And we are not to limit ourselves by the words, but to listen to the ideas, the concepts that the words are describing. Okay. And I I go into this, I have magnets to assist me in this, but I want to show you one of the participants last Tuesday said this was helpful, because what I've done with these is I've taken them, maybe too much light for that. It's not important whether you're reading what's there, but see how I've kind of bracketed and underlined and said things in the margins. Then these are from my meditations. Don't know how I can get it clear, but anyway, it's just an idea of how I've phrased. Now, I'm not saying this is the way. This is not. This is the way that worked for me, but I don't want you to take it as anything of if it can assist you in any way, because you may have a different formatting of those. But the idea is the recorder, Christ gave these ideas to her, these thoughts. My understanding, not my understanding, just what I assume. If I were doing these letters, I would think this is how it would come, that Christ says all these things, like, how do I express that? How do I put this into words? How do I put this on a page? So what she was guided to do is to phrase them in ways that disturb our reading. You know, we read a paragraph and it's okay, it's self-contained, but these paragraphs are like not even full statements. They're phrases that have been set aside and individualized. That's the word I want, have been individualized. And it's for us to put it together to get us from the individualizations to the greater, to the greater, to the greater, to a full understanding of the parts making up the whole, and even more than that. So Christ begins. So this is the beginning of what I call the white water. And I think I've done so much introducing that I don't think I'm going to spend as much time on this as I normally do. So, and I trust it's all good. You know, I trust we're all in this consciousness of Christ, that this is all making sense. So Christ starts out with all, spiritual, unseen, seen, imagined. All, invisible, visible, and everything in between. All, spiritual, unseen, seen, imagined, is consciousness awareness. So consciousness is totally aware of itself. Not the way we humans think of it through the senses. It's totally aware of its idea, its intent, and this is what Christ is going to describe for us. So all is consciousness awareness. The tree is a consciousness awareness of being a tree. Okay. The primary comprehensive nature of consciousness is awareness. It is not possible to have consciousness without possessing awareness. Now we know this as a human being. I can't be aware without being conscious, and I can't be conscious without being aware. That's hand in glove. There's no separation in that. Can't have one without the other. It's self-deduced. Okay. All that you see, all that you touch, hear, feel, know is consciousness awareness made visible. So all form is consciousness made visible. There's nothing in the universe that is not consciousness made visible. Anything we can see is consciousness. It's conscious behind it. So the computer, the phone, the book, the buildings, everything is consciousness awareness. We think because man has created this that it's separate from God, it's separate from intelligence, but it's not. We manufacture the intelligence in anything that we manufacture, because we take that intelligence from source that tells us how to do it, to perform that which we want performed, and then we create it that way. But the universal mind, the consciousness awareness, is what brings itself into manifestation, into visible form. Consciousness awareness is infinite and eternal. Now, this is where, for me, this is where it began, but with all I've introduced, I think this is very easy. There are two dimensions of consciousness. Okay, so there's consciousness. Now for us, we say there's consciousness and subconsciousness. Ernest Holmes in Christ says it's all consciousness, just not even two aspects of it. It's all creative. But here he's talking about there are two dimensions of consciousness, both beyond and within your own earthly plane of existence, the plane of heavy matter, solid form. Okay? So there are two dimensions of consciousness everywhere present. There's the ultimate universal dimension of consciousness awareness. So one's called the ultimate universal dimension of consciousness awareness, which can never fully or truly be known by an individualized spirit. It is inaccessible, is in equilibrium. Synonymous to that is space. We know the space is everywhere present. Space is between every cell, between every molecule within a cell. Space is around everything because space is that which the form comes from. And space is more than the non-form. Okay, so space is that which lacks consciousness, excuse me. I love the way my brain goes. So the universe, before anything was, there was just space, which I lovingly call the nothingness from which everything comes. And this space is vibrational energy. It's the raw material, so to speak, that consciousness, something happens in the space, something moves, as Christ tells us, something moves and something happens. So consciousness activates portions of space. And there's still space within, around, through, and as, everything that's coming into form, okay? Everything is space. And the space is what the atoms or the particles of the atoms come from. You know, it's just undescribable and undefinable, as Christ tells us and encourages us. So there are two dimensions of consciousness. The ultimate universal dimension of consciousness awareness can never be fully or truly known by an individualized spirit. It is inaccessible. It is in equilibrium. It is the only source. The only source. This is why Christ is saying we can't call it nothing, because it's a source of everything. So it can't be unintelligent. It can't be unlife. It cannot be unactive. You know, it just, I don't know. So this is why meditation is so important. That's why I get into this, because it immediately takes me into meditation. It takes me into, wow, what is he saying? What are the concepts that are coming forth here? And even though I share mine with my excitement and my understanding, it's only what I've gotten from my meditations. Your meditation may take you on a whole different path, journey, and great, because they're all right. You know, that's the beauty of Christ's teachings. They're right. We're each going to get it at our own individualized form of understanding. So, and I'm interested in you sharing yours. I'm sharing mine with you. So share yours with me at chapelinthesky@aol.com. So this ultimate universal dimension is inaccessible, which I thought, how can I not go there? And Christ reveals that if I go there, I have to give up my consciousness. So consciousness cannot go there, or it's going to be unconscious. It's going to be that from which everything comes, instead of being something from which everything comes, an idea, an intention. So this space, this ultimate, this nothing that I call from which everything comes, this space, is the only source of all power, all wisdom, all love, and intelligence. It's the only source. So the only thing that's lacking is an idea. That's what activates it. Okay. Now the second dimension Christ calls, instead of the ultimate universal dimension, Christ refers to it as the universal dimension. Okay, so he's dropped the word ultimate. So that helped me in understanding these two dimensions. One is universal dimension, which is the dimension that we normally, I think, call God, because that's a consciousness that comes. But then there's the ultimate, that's before consciousness, like before God, that from which God comes even. But then, in truth, our belief, our understanding is God is all, God is the source of all, and Christ is telling us that also, that this is a source of all power, the only power, all understanding and everything. So, sorry for that. The universal dimension of consciousness, awareness, and equilibrium. So I want to talk about equilibrium. Look at these two very powerful magnets. Now, I'm going to pull them apart, okay? I'm going to turn one upside down, and I'm going to try to put them together. Whoops, I did it backwards. So this is the attraction. So, but I'm feeling the pull. As I bring these objects together, I can feel them, right here it's beginning. This is how powerful these magnets are. Right here, I'm feeling them pulling each to the other. And here, there's just equilibrium. There is nothing. There is no vibration. There's no attraction. There's no repulsion. There's nothing. There's just the is from which everything comes. And it's energized, this is energized, this is energized. Wow, this is great. But there's no attraction. There's nothing to resist or nothing to pull, okay? But as I start bringing them together, right about here, I can feel their energy, okay? I got these at Michael's, so if you go to an art store, you can do that yourself and really feel this because it's really amazing. And then the closer they come together, the stronger the pull is, and I have to be resisting them coming together. You could see that and hear that, okay? So now, I guess if I turn it this way, yeah. So now if I turn them in opposite direction, okay, so this would be pulling towards something else, this would be pulling towards something else, but they can't pull to each other. There's resistance. They're not meant to come together, okay? They are meant to repel, but that energy is, wow, very, very strong, Now, there's the attraction of it. The attraction is trying to, that which is pushing away, there's a strong energy to go around it, or above it, or below it, or beside it. Whatever I do in any direction is going to be the attraction that's going to, wham, pull them together, okay? So, yeah, so magnets are very cool about this whole thing. So I trust that. Keep that image in mind and I'll bring them to mind. I'm not going to bring them back because it's too distracting. So the universal dimension of consciousness awareness in equilibrium. So notice equilibrium is always important. Equilibrium is saying total perfect balance. Okay, when something is balanced, that's what the Lady of Justice or whatever that thing is called with the ballast, the law is supposed to bring balance, which we know, at least in American, it doesn't work that way. It depends on the lawyers, not justice necessarily. So in balance, there's no resistance and there's no attraction. It just is, okay? The potential, the possibility, okay? So the universal dimension of consciousness, awareness, and equilibrium is a state of silence and stillness. And out of this silence and stillness comes sound, color, individualized form, and all visible creativity within the visible universe. Out of ultimate universal dimension, ultimate now again, okay? Out of ultimate universal dimension of consciousness, awareness, and equilibrium has come all of creation, all the various unseen dimensions of existence, descending in order of spirituality from the very portals of the universal dimension down to the most ponderous vibrational frequencies of inanimate earthly substances, and beyond into the unspeakable horrors of consciousness perversions and anti-truth. Okay, so again, the ultimate consciousness is that from which all dimensions come. In the universal dimension, without the ultimate, that is various dimensions within itself, that it takes on individualizations. The ultimate, there is no individualization. Okay, yeah. So in the ultimate, there is no individualization. And in universal consciousness in equilibrium, there are only divisions, but they're all within one consciousness as well. So it's always the whole coming into its parts and always being more than the sum of its parts. Always, always, always. Okay, wow. I love this stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been doing this since 2006. I've been reading this at least once a year, but meditating on it in between meditating. So I'm just sharing what's come over these years, and I encourage you to meditate. If you really want to live as Christ, or have Christ live through you in its perfect expression of being, which it always is, I invite you to meditate, meditate, meditate on these paragraphs, because the only thing that keeps me from doing all that Jesus did is the belief that I can't. And Christ is saying, here's all the nourishment and nurturement you need so that you can do all that I said you can do. So I'm going to read again. Out of ultimate universal dimension of consciousness awareness and equilibrium has come all of creation, all the various unseen dimensions of existence. Okay, that's why I'm saying in it exists all dimensions. And each dimension then becomes its own individualized dimension. So thinking of our galaxy, the Milky Way, well, there are many solar systems within this galaxy, and each one has its own consciousness within the galaxy. Within our solar system, there are many planets. There's only one Earth. There is one sun and a multiple of planets. This solar system has its own consciousness. The Earth within this solar system has its own consciousness to support its unique life separate from Venus and Mars and Jupiter and Uranus and Pluto and on, you know, all the planets, those that are seen and those that may not be seen yet. You know, we're still finding things. But all of these are consciousness within consciousness within consciousness within consciousness. Okay, so this is how the universal consciousness is. It's universal, yes, but it still has all these consciousnesses. Just like, so then there's earth, and there's animal and vegetable and mineral, and then in the animal there's mammal and non-mammal, and in mammal there's all forms of different genera of being till we finally get to the human being of mammal. And within us we also have races, and we have different abilities, and on and on and on. Everything is individualized, consciousness individualized, and consciousness in consciousness. So, and he finishes with, because this universal consciousness is only for good, it's only for wholeness, it's only in balance and harmony and beauty. But we humans have taken we have brought from this consciousness in the infinity of possibilities, we have brought forth unspeakable horrors of consciousness perversions and anti-truth, which we cannot see outside of humanity, because outside of humanity is only eating from the tree of life, not from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We believe there's an evil, therefore we have created that which we believe. If we believe there's a Satan as opposed to God, then I need a bigger God that is a creator of all. And if there's a Satan within God, it has a potential of being good, because God is only good, and it serves some purpose for humanity. But my belief is humanity has brought forth Satan to give a definition as to why people do bad things. Okay, so there's this force, just like the magnets, there's this force that's doing that. But if I tune into that force as the magnets, I attract it. If I don't believe in that force, I'm repelling it. And I absolutely do not believe in a Satan. I do not believe in an evil force of any kind. I do not believe in possession. I believe all of these things exist within the mind of that which brings it forth, okay? Jesus showed us how to repel all that. He said, resist not evil. He said to Satan when Satan was addressing him in some way, get thee behind me. You know, you have no power over me. I am the light. You are the darkness. You know, I know who I am, and I know who you are, and that takes all your power away, because when I see you as light, you have no power anymore. So, okay, so going back to the ultimate universal dimension again of consciousness awareness is not only in space, okay, so we go from ultimate universal consciousness to universal consciousness back to ultimate universal consciousness. It's not a seesaw, it's giving us things to meditate on and to go back and forth, which takes me from the universal consciousness into the ultimate, from the ultimate back to the universal, so I get a better understanding of how this all interferes itself. So this ultimate universal dimension of consciousness awareness is not only in space, it is all space. It is undetectably everywhere. Can't see space, can we? Can't see it. This is what science is looking for. Science is looking for the beginning of everything that is. They can't find it because it's only an energy. It's only that from which everything comes. And we can't find it because it's beyond, it's the ultimate, it's beyond senses. Oh yeah. See what Christ is saying here? Wow. Okay, so the ultimate universal dimension, consciousness awareness, is not only in space, it is all space. It is undetectably everywhere. For those who think in terms of atoms, you can say it is the space in the atom. Therefore, it is in silence and equilibrium within space of all elements and matter. Wow. The true nature of universal consciousness is intent. This is where we're going to begin next week, but I'm going to continue reading because we continued last Tuesday. So I'll read this briefly because we'll be doing it in more detail next week when we read it. But I want to get us a feel, an introduction, so that as we go through this white water, we know how to maneuver through it. Okay. So first is getting this overview of what it looks like. The nature, that's the key word. The nature of universal consciousness is intent, inactive and in equilibrium. So intention is what's going to be the first, like bringing the magnets together. It's going to be the first energy of attraction, as well as in that energy repulsion of anything that is. So it's an automatic censoring out of the energy that's not needed and attracting the energy that is needed to bring into form that which it desires to bring into form. So the nature of universal consciousness is intent, inactive, and in equilibrium. Therefore, universal consciousness is an infinite, eternal, limitless, boundless state of powerful intent. Pristine, pure, beautiful, because in this original, there's no separation yet. Okay, it's the intent which brings the first individualization of consciousness. This intent is to express its nature. What do I want to do? When I get an idea, what do I want to do with that idea? I let it ponder, I contemplate, or I take it into action, or I call someone, but the intent begins something. Universal consciousness nature, intent, is the allness of will and purpose. I'm going to be talking a lot about this. Christ in Letter 4 gave us the whole depth of human intercourse, copulation, and conception. And he did that so we can get an idea of the nature of the male and the nature of the female, the nature of the masculine, the nature of the feminine. Now in this letter, he takes out the male and the female and uses masculine, feminine. And I know he's going there. So all the way through this discourse, through this white water, he's showing the interrelationships between the masculine and feminine. Masculine and feminine are like two sides of the coin. It's like the two sides of the magnet, or the two ends. We know that one is north and one is south. If I turn it upside down, it has the same thing. North and south are the same. Okay. I determine. So I'm holding it this way, so I'm calling north top, calling south bottom. If I turn it upside down, I can still call this north and this south. But if I go to the southern hemisphere, it's going to the other end. So for the planet Earth, the north is always at the Arctic Circle, and the south is always at the Antarctic Circle. Isn't that interesting? Humans are so great when we put things together, the Arctic and the Antarctic. Wow. So the intent is that which brings the desire to come together. And it's all before the intent. So the magnets exist, and they're what I'll call the intent. Okay, and that intent has a specific purpose, and everything for that purpose to come together attracts that which is needed. Okay. Okay, so universal consciousness nature intent is the allness of will and purpose. Now I'm going to call will, not I. Christ is going to call will masculine and purpose feminine, and he will describe this. He keeps defining these, but if we keep masculine and feminine, we're learning the wholeness of existence through the polarity that's not really opposed to itself, because it's always in equilibrium and balance. But will and purpose work together and also separate with each other. So it's okay, because will and purpose are always locked in embrace. So it's always, this magnet is always attracting and repelling. Always, always, always acting and repelling when in concert with another. So the universal will is to move out and create, the masculine. The universal purpose is to give individualized form to creation and experience it. The feminine is the womb of creation, as Holmes calls it, that gives form to everything. So the will is like the sperm, and the purpose is like the egg, the ovum. Okay. Both of these exist within the ultimate universal dimension of consciousness, awareness, intent. Okay. Wow. I'm not going to go there. I haven't read it that way in the context of what I've been meditating thus far, so I'll come back to that instead of doing it here. Universal will, now the universal will, not the ultimate universal. The universal will is in a state of mutual restraint. Now remember, the will is the masculine. So it's in a state of mutual restraint with universal purpose. Now restraint is that which is pushing away, and yet there's that desire to come together. So it's like pushing together, pushing apart what is not, so it can attract to itself what it is, okay? So I don't know if these magnets help you. They really help me anyway. So universal will is in a state of mutual restraint with universal purpose. Okay, so it's like two sides of the coin attracting to each other and pushing away from each other, which is energy. It's only energy, and that creates the energy. That push-pull is the energy itself. And how it works is amazing. Okay, so universal will is in a state of mutual restraint with universal purpose. So the masculine and feminine are in mutual restraint, both in equilibrium within silence and stillness. So there's no sense of can't. It's only There's only opportunity. Universal will is universal intelligence. Universal purpose is universal love. So we have universal intelligence is masculine, universal love is feminine. Okay. Again, this is everywhere present in consciousness before intent starts dimensioning. Okay. Universal will is universal intelligence. Universal purpose is universal love. Universally in equilibrium in mutual restraint, out of which all things visible and invisible and human impulses have taken form. This is unexplainable. This is unimaginable. This is infinite, eternal. So we just have to take our best stab at it and see how it works for us. If you could receive the fullness of universal reality into yourself, you'd be disintegrated by its explosive power and dissolved into formless consciousness awareness. It as far transcends the individual humanhood as the heat and light of your sun is billion times more powerful than the light of your fireflies flickering in darkness. Okay, I think I went further than I did on Tuesday, but that's okay. I'm going to stop here. And again, and I will announce this, we will begin at we're going to begin with the ultimate universal dimension of consciousness / awareness is not only in space, it is all space. And I will see you next week, either live, if you want information on that, chapelinthesky@aol.com, or in a recording following that. I thank you for being with me today. And if you're interested in my other YouTubes, it's at chapel-in-the-sky at YouTube. That's my channel. So thank you for being with me. Make this a blessed day. If you're seeing this before going to bed, have a wonderful sleep time. Take this into your sleep and meditate on it, and wake up refreshed, renewed, and ready to live from the intention that we set for this day. God bless you. Namaste. The Christ of me salutes and honors the Christ of you as one Christ. Bye-bye for now.